I'd like to call the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees meeting for Thursday, February 2nd, 2023 to order. We can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Manager Francis, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. President Ballerine.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Gallegos.
Here.
Trustee Clarity.
Here.
Trustee Marshazga.
Here.
Trustee Hannan.
Here.
Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Village Attorney Michael Mars.
Here.
Also present, Village Manager Jessica Francis.
Thank you. First matter of business is the President's report. Assalamu alaikum. I greet you tonight with the Arabic phrase of peace be with you. This past weekend, Trustee Evans and I, along with several Riverside residents, various village officials from neighboring towns, Secretary of State Janulius and U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, witnessed the historic swearing-in of our new state representative, Abu Nasser Rashid. His family story drives him for our families, drives him to fight for our families. 55 years ago, Abdel Nasser's parents moved to America from rural Palestine village where educational opportunities were scarce, especially for women. They were among the first in the village to send their daughters to college. Abdel Nasser grew up helping his mother run a booth in a local flea market, and his father operated a small retail business in Chicago. He went on to receive his degree from Harvard University. Representative Rashid is the first Palestinian American to be elected as an Illinois representative and only the second Muslim. His background and service to this point makes him uniquely qualified to understand the burdens of government on its constituency. He is committed to take on corruption, unfair taxation, unfunded mandates, and immigration reform, and the restoration of our LGDF funds to the local municipalities. We all wish Representative Abdel Nasser Rashid the best of luck over the next 4 years. Thank you. Manager Francis?
I do not have a report this evening.
Okay. We will move on to residents' comments on non-agenda items. I ask if there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on any item that's not on the agenda tonight. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We will, as follows, any member of the Board of Trustees or member of the public may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda to pending or new business for separate consideration. Without Ethan here, I will read it tonight. I can do it. Ratify voucher list bills of January 19th, 2023. Approve voucher list of bills February 2nd, 2023. Approve the Village Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes January 5th, 2023. Review and file Landscape Advisory Commission regular meeting minutes October 11th, 2022. Review and file Economic Development Commission meetings regular meeting minutes November 10th, 2022. Review and file Riverside TV Commission regular meeting minutes November 14th, 2022. Review and file Historical Commission regular meeting minutes November 21st, 2022. Review and file Riverside TV Commission regular meeting minutes December 12th, 2022. Review and file Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes December 28th, 2022. Review and file November 2022 monthly reports. Review and file Fire, Police, Community Development, Public Works, and Finance December 2022 monthly reports. A resolution authorizing sale or disposal of personal property owned by the Village of Riverside. A resolution authorizing the expenditure of $340,000 for 2023 maintenance under the Illinois Highway Code. A resolution authorizing and approving execution of a 2023 tree and stump removal and emergency storage damage response service contract with Homer Tree Care, and authorizing the village manager to issue a purchase order or orders regarding the same in the amount not to exceed $60,000 annually. A resolution approving and authorizing execution of the 2023 cyclic and on-demand tree pruning contract with Homer Tree Care, and authorizing the village manager to issue a purchase order or orders regarding the same in the amount not to exceed $90,000 annually. A resolution authorizing the village manager to create a purchase order in the amount of $26,550 for Christopher Burke Engineering to provide professional design services, engineering service as part of the Kent Road and Lincoln Avenue Greenway projects. A resolution waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to enter a purchase order with Munivate for consultation configuration, system design and training for BSNA database not to exceed $22,000. A resolution waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to enter into various purchase orders for fiscal year 2022. Man, I miss Ethan. Do any of these items need to be removed? Hearing none. If I can ask for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Gallegos, second.
Second.
Second by trustee Clarity. Is there any further comments? Hearing none. Manager Francis, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye. Motion carries. Move on to the board, department board and commission reports. First, we have the Riverside TV Commission 2023 budget work plan. Chairman Hughes.
Good evening, Village Board. Thanks for having me. I'm here to present Riverside's 2023 work plan. 2022 was an exciting year for Riverside TV that saw a return to our normal production schedule coming off of the last of the COVID lockdowns. We're excited to carry that momentum into 2023. The foundation of Riverside TV's programming is its municipal coverage. That includes the Riverside Village Board, Riverside Township, District 96, and the Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission. In addition, Riverside TV will continue to cover a number of community events, including concert at Big Ballpark, 4th of July Parade, 9/11 ceremony, C4 meetings, and many more that are outlined in our work plan. The Commission has also been working on a number of special projects. The first has been a collaboration with our fellow WCCA communities to modernize our broadcast means. Previously, you could only watch the Riverside TV channel if you lived in Riverside and were a paying subscriber to either Comcast or AT&T Cable. As of today, we have launched a Roku app that will allow you to watch from anywhere. This will be a joint effort. This is a joint effort with other communities, including LaGrange Park, Western Springs, Indian Head Park, Riverside Brookfield High School, and Lyons Township High School. Right now, it's just us on there, but in the coming weeks and months, we'll be adding the rest of those municipalities. Accessibility and transparency are important to us, and this is a major step towards that. Riverside TV's history goes back to the 1990s, where everything was recorded on VHS tape. We still have those VHS tapes, but not a way to view them. So in November, the Commission secured a grant from the Riverside Township to digitize all those VHS tapes. We dropped them off with our vendor in early January, and the goal is to have all those digital files back by the end of February, pending how long it takes them to get through. However many hours we're on those tapes, because we don't know. From there, we're working with Commissioner Karina Conscious, and who's a teacher at Hauser Junior High, and her media class to use those videos for her class to learn editing software, and at the same time prepping them for us to be able to broadcast and post on YouTube. So it's a good mix there of learning how to edit and trim video. Finally, I'd like to thank the Riverside TV staff, including Joe Doria, Lorenzo Cordova, Jason Valley, Zach Cameron, and the rest of the Riverside TV crew. Nothing we do would be possible without them and their hard work. Also, thank you to the village board, village manager, and assistant village manager. We wouldn't be able to function without them. So, thank you. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from anyone? How far are we from going live with the Roku?
It's live.
Is it? Go.
Village stream, you can queue it up right now.
Okay. Thank you.
You got
You
it.
guys have done a great job.
Thank you.
I've talked to several people, and we've gone over stuff that Riverside TV's, and everyone is amazed that this town has such a robust TV.
I mean, really, it's kudos to the crew. We meet once a month for a few hours, and they're the ones working their tails off all month, all year.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Colin.
Second thing on tonight's agenda is Economic Development Commission, Chairperson Forsberg.
Good evening, Village Board members. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you. Just got a couple brief notes. I know you have a full meeting tonight, so I'll keep it really brief. The Riverside Economic Development Commission is a group of residents that have a really sincere and deep passion for the village of Westmont, and we're very fortunate to have them involved in the community and working with us. I'm so sorry. For those who don't know, I work in Westmont. The Riverside Economic Development Commission, we have a great group of people working with the Village of Westmont Economic Development Commission, sharing their knowledge and their expertise and their passion, and it's really makes a big difference. I also want to give a shout out to our staff who work with us to support all the EDC goals. Very critical. So the Economic Development Commission mission is to encourage economic development of the community. We work very closely with the village and the residents to study the retail businesses in the community and recommend plans for encouraging commercial development and improving village sales tax and our tax base. So in keeping with the Riverside Economic Development Commission mission, we prepared an annual work plan for 2023. First item on that plan is to attract new businesses, which is always critical to the success of any community. We plan to utilize the vacant properties that we have in town, and we plan on using the new village website to help attract those new businesses to the community. The second item was also super critical, and that's to support and retain local businesses. It's just as important to retain the businesses as to recruit a new one. So through providing information to our business community, keeping them engaged with the village, making sure they understand how to pull permits, how to engage with grants, how to participate in events, all those things will help. We also plan on continuing to do ribbon cuttings throughout the community and helping jumpstart awareness of new business or celebrate a milestone that a business may be celebrating at any given time. We're also very excited to be working with the Riverside Chamber of Commerce. In the last few months, they have come a long way in re-engaging in the community and creating visibility. So we are excited for what the year holds ahead for us in terms of working and collaborating and working closely with the Riverside Chamber of Commerce. When it comes to the second topic, though, EDC is fully aware that the village board's been discussing what banners may be publicly displayed in the village and what type of village communications will occur in general. As far as this topic as this topic is being discussed, the EDC respectfully requests that EDC be supported to continue to promote Westmont, whether it's promoting our basically our events, whether it's promoting our tourism attractions or promoting our businesses. It's all these things are super critical, and it plays directly to our mission, which is to promote and help increase our sales tax revenues and tax base. So again, as we discuss those topics, we ask that you continue to help support our local business community through promotion of them. The third item is increasing awareness of Riverside. We plan to continue working with the Visit Oak Park, which is a tourism bureau for the western suburbs. They have done a phenomenal job for us in the past, and we will continue to work with them to promote all the great attractions that we have here. And those are the three key areas we'll be working on this year. We appreciate your time and your support of the EDC, and if there's any questions I can answer, I'm more than happy to.
Anybody have questions for Chairperson Forsberg? Hearing none. Larry, I really appreciate you taking over as chair. You've done a great job, and I really appreciate you coming in. I know you have other things to do in another business, but it was very nice of you to take over.
It's been my pleasure, and we truly do have a great group of commissioners and great staff support, and that really helps us get our work done, so thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, we move on to pending business. Ms. Siren, we're going to go through the TOD ordinances one at a time. So each zoning district one at a time, so we could take it kind of slowly and concise, so everyone knows exactly what's going on, so nothing gets missed. So it's your show. Yes, sir.
Are we voting after each presentation, or are we voting?
We will vote after each ordinance. Yes. Okay.
The first ordinance is fairly straightforward. There haven't been any changes since you've last reviewed it. It establishes the minimum building height in the R3 and R4 districts, refines outdoor lighting standards, adds relevant definitions, and updates images.
Okay. Ordinance number 1, do we have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
Motion by trustee Gallegos, second.
I'll second.
Second by trustee Hannan. Any further comments? Hearing none. Ms. Francis?
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
Aye.
Okay. Ordinance number 2. Yes, Mr. Pollock.
Should we take some things out of order since we have a resident here?
Well, we can, but I think
Okay,
let's
that's
get
fine.
through these 4, and then we
Okay.
will. Okay.
Ordinance 2 notably addresses the bulk requirements in the B2 district and parking facilities for alternative modes of transportation. Since the board last reviewed it, the language regarding office uses being special uses was removed. Now offices are permitted on the ground floor by right in the B1 and B2 districts.
And that is the only change in the B1? Is that the only change?
Yes, that's
in the
correct.
ordinance? Okay. Can I have a motion?
Motion made.
Motion by trustee Gallegos, second.
Second.
By trustee Hannan. Any further comments? Just-
Is this with respect to the building heights?
Yes,
In the
this is the
B2.
this is the PUD and the B2?
Yeah, so I do object to changing the building heights from the existing building heights. I don't have a problem with doing a PUD, however, I would not do a PUD to the level that is suggested in this draft. I would have it be capped at 4 stories. I think it's really important to maintain the water tower as the focal centerpiece in the central business district. I think that our history is important. I think it compels a different treatment in the center of town. I did change my position with respect to the Harlem Avenue districts because in light of the survey that was conducted and residents' input and the fact that it is basically a state highway out there. But I cannot let go of that feeling that our existing heights, which were established after a lot of thought and deliberation and consideration, are acceptable.
Okay, thank you. I kind of rushed to ask for a motion in a second, and I don't think I gave trustee Marshazga an ample time to express her concerns before it. So can I wipe those 2 out and ask for a motion now? If maybe there's,
I'll
it's
withdraw my second.
second. Would you,
So we have a discussion?
we're going to have a discussion. yeah.
I'll withdraw it
Okay,
momentarily.
thank you. Is there any further discussion on this part? Yes, Doug?
Could staff remind us of what the existing height restrictions are in the B2 and what the proposed changes are?
Absolutely. In the B2 district, currently, the maximum building height is 3 stories or 38 feet, whichever is lower, with the height to the peak of a pitched roof not to exceed 45 feet. And the proposed change would make the maximum building height 4 stories or 48 feet, whichever is lower, with the maximum peak height being 50 feet. And additional language would be added so that for PUDs can be as tall as up to 5 stories or 66 feet, whichever is lower.
Follow up to that, so the current code it limits it at 3 stories, gives no options for PUD to be taller or special use to be taller. It's 3 stories, period.
That's correct.
Could
I
you
guess
all-
if we wanted to modify that a little bit, I guess I wouldn't have a problem saying 3 stories permitted and 4 or 5 subject to a PUD. And I would reiterate what I said at the last meeting, that PUD is really hard to get approved. But I don't mind letting the village have the option to consider buildings that are 4 or 5 stories, but I can certainly understand trustee Marshazga's concerns.
Give me the 4 stories again, please, the height.
Sure. So currently, the maximum height is 3 stories or 38 feet to a peak height of 45 feet. The proposed would be 4 stories or 48 feet to a peak of 50 feet. And that's not considering a PUD. Within a PUD, the proposed language would allow up to 5 stories or 66 feet, whichever is lower.
And how tall is the Village Center?
I'm sorry,
The Village Center is
Village Center? Can you-
50, 55? So even our 4 stories is less than the PUD, the 50, the Village Center.
It would be shorter than Village Center by several feet.
Okay. All right, and the Village Center was not developed with a PUD, so just want to make sure we have that, but go ahead.
Yeah, I go back to the comments we made when we first addressed this, want to do what we can to promote development. I understand trustee Marsh-Ozga's concern about the water tower, and I do believe that that's an objective, but, given Village Center and given sort of the isolation of the water tower by the streetscape, really the only potential concern I see is on that corner of Forest Avenue and East Avenue of development going there. Going east down Burlington Street in this B2, I just quite frankly don't see a concern why we wouldn't allow 4 stories as a matter of right. My understanding is that, in developing in residential areas of this type, anything 3 stories or below is just economically unfeasible to build. So if we're looking to be, friendlier to redevelopment of our aging buildings on Burlington, I'd recommend staying to what's proposed with the 4 stories as a matter of right and 5 stories through a PUD.
Yes.
I found the exact measurements. The water tower is 70 feet and the Village Center is 50 feet, 6 inches.
Okay, thank you. Now that we have that, if I can have a motion?
I will reinstate my motion.
Motion to approve. Motion to approve, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Manager Francis?
Trustee Evans?
No.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
No.
Trustee Hannan?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
No.
So that's a tie.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Move on to C, number 3.
Ordinance 3 creates the B1 TOD subdistrict and establishes permitted uses. It also amends uses in the B1 and B2 subdistricts, amends the bulk requirements in the B1 subdistricts, revises parking standards, and creates standards for EV charging stations. Since the board last reviewed it, the language regarding offices on the ground floor in the B2 district being special uses was removed, and the 20-foot setback from residential uses in the B1 district was established.
Okay, this is the one we had the most changes on. So I will open it up for discussion. Mr. Pollock?
Go first. I would like to suggest that we remand this particular ordinance to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a couple of reasons. One is we started this process with an agreed-upon mission, or vision, I should say, an agreed-upon vision to create transit-oriented development at Harlem and Burlington. I think the change that we are proposing that would eliminate the maximum 5-foot setback is directly contrary to that vision, and therefore it needs to be enlightened more by planning and zoning consideration before I'm comfortable considering approving it. As I said before, that seems like a small change. It's just one change. But when you look at the building height minimum and the special use for parking in the front yard, when you combine those, currently they are clearly intended to create a certain type of development, a certain type of building, a building that connects directly to the street, the sidewalk, has some mass to it to create a streetscape, and has limited, if any, front yard parking. By eliminating that 5-foot maximum, you're compromising those other two standards. I question whether you even need those other two standards if you're eliminating the maximum 5-foot setback. So I think we're making a significant change in the vision for that area. I also see that Burlington area in particular, more so than Harlem, as an incredible development opportunity or economic development opportunity for the village, and I don't think we've given that enough attention. Secondly, during this process and after the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this, we did a survey that was very well done by staff, and that survey, in my opinion, what we're approving here is contrary to that survey that we did. To me, it was very clear in that survey that what residents want is a more transit-oriented development type of development. The photographs of buildings with parking in the front and one story were all given negative reviews in the survey, whereas the photographs with taller buildings that are to the street line were given positive reviews. I would like for us to have the Planning and Zoning Commission look at that again and see if they agree with the changes we made or not, have a little bit more public airing of those changes before we act on it. So when the time is right, I'd like to make a motion to remand. Can I do that now? May I do that now?
Sure. Sure.
I move that we remand this ordinance and the related zoning regulations to Planning and Zoning Commission for further review.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Trustee Evans. Any further comments? Mr. Hannan.
I sat on planning and zoning. Trustee Pollock mentioned sending it back to planning and zoning for their enlightenment. I'm not struggling to understand what that means. We spent a significant amount of meeting time over the past several weeks. The survey that was referenced, I believe, had around 111, 112 responses, roughly. I don't view that as being a mandate. I view sending it back to planning and zoning as just a delaying tactic. We spent a significant amount of time. We've had a significant amount of discussion. We, as the board, are the elected officials here. Planning and zoning is not. So I'd rather keep the decision-making here and not vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you. Anybody on this side would like? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second.
something.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I understand that we're the elected bodies, and I understand what you're saying. However, I am not comfortable making a decision about this without hearing more from planning and zoning. I think we can wait and get all the information that we can. I don't see anything wrong with sending it back and to see what they say. It's changed a lot. It's not the same ordinance that we've been looking at for weeks. It's changed.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, it has changed materially, and I don't think the full board has been,
Okay.
And-
We changed it. So I
Right.
just.
Oh, I know.
So,
I know we did.
And I think this is my personal feeling, is between planning and zoning was tasked with TOD, and that's what they did. They did it very well. The village board is tasked with both TOD and development, and that's what we did. We took on the development part of this, and like I've said numerous times, Harlem has been stagnant for 5 decades. So something needs to be done, and something needs to be drastically done. And I think this answers it. But again, that's my opinion. So we have a motion and a second. There's any further comments before we?
Could you read the motion again, please?
The motion is to
Remand.
remand the ordinance back to planning and zoning. And was made by trustee Pollock, second by trustee Evans. Any further question? No. Hearing none. Manager Francis?
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
No.
Trustee Clarity?
No.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan?
No.
Trustee Pollock?
Aye.
President Valerie?
No. We move on to letter D.
Uh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
You need to, are you going to do a motion to approve the ordinance? Because you just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Denied the remand.
We need a, thank you.
You're welcome.
We need a motion to approve the ordinance.
So moved.
Made by trustee Gallego, second.
second.
Second by trustee Hannan. Manager Francis, if you would please call this roll.
Certainly. Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you. We move on. Go ahead.
We did not have any, I don't have any comments on the motion, but you didn't ask for any discussion on the motion. I was wondering if there was anybody wanted to make any comments
I opened it up for discussion at the beginning and after the the
after the motion.
motion was made.
Procedure,
Okay,
sorry.
Sorry. Is there anybody else want to have any more comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to D.
Sure. And just a note before we go to D, staff did include information about the site plan review in your packets, and we'll bring forward a framework for changes to your next meeting, unless you wanted to give additional discussion, but I thought I'd bring it up since it related to TOD. Ordinance 4 amends the official zoning map, and nothing has changed since the board last reviewed it. I just want to note that the village-owned property near the intersection of Burlington and Harlem was added to the district.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions? Hearing none, if I can have a motion to accept?
To accept number D?
Yes.
Letter D? Motion made.
Motion by trustee Gallego, second.
I'll second.
Second by trustee Hannan. Any further comments? Hearing none. Manager?
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you. We move on to E, the ordinance relative to accessory structures in residential zoning districts.
So this is a longstanding issue that the board has considered several times, and the most recent changes to the ordinance would allow an accessory structure, a detached accessory structure, to be used completely in its entirety. Currently, it's only 25% can be used as a home occupation, but it can be used entirely as a home occupation on someone's property. I wanted to note just a couple of limiting factors. There were some concerns about having buildings that were too large in scale for the site and too close to other properties. And so just a couple of things of note. The proposed amendments would limit accessory structures to a single story with an attic area. That attic area is limited in size. 50% of the attic area can have a ceiling height of up to 7 feet 6 inches. So the height is limited, which means that instead of having a tall, boxy structure for 2 stories, the roof would be inward to create that area. Accessory structures would be limited to being behind the principal structure. They cannot be taller than the principal structure, but we did increase the height from 16 or 18 feet to 20 feet. For those structures that are over 18 feet in height, there is an extra 1 foot setback from any adjacent property lines. For each foot in height, there's an increase. So a 19-foot tall structure would have an additional 1 foot setback, 20 feet, an additional 2 feet. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have about the ordinance.
Is there any questions? Any comments? I only have one on page 370. 10-11-4, current text, proposed text. And then the proposed text was any structure built for support, shelter, closure of persons, animals, chattels, or movable property of any kind, which is permanently affixed to the land. I would like the word chattels removed from that, because chattels is movable property. It's redundant. And that's all I have. Anybody else? Hearing none, if I can have a motion and a second?
Motion is made with the change of the removal of chattels.
Motion by trustee Gallegos, second. Second by trustee Marshazga. Any further comments? Hearing none. Ms. Francis?
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan?
Aye.
Trustee Polly?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Letter F is going to be tabled, and if, Mr. Mars, if you can explain why.
Sure. As the board will recall, we've also been considering some text amendments related to event tents and these type of accessory structures. That item has received a public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they have made their findings and recommendations upon the referral from this board. That ordinance is prepared but was inadvertently left out of the packet, so we're going to table this item because the church has indicated that in the event those text amendments are approved, that they would withdraw their variation request. So we don't want to take action on this until we know whether the text amendments are going to be approved. So we'll take this up at our next meeting.
Thank you. Now, do we have to do a date certain on this?
Yes, you
Like we-
do. So
Okay.
the next
16th.
meeting is,
16th.
okay. So a motion and a second to bring this back at the February 16th
I'll
meeting.
make that motion to the February 16th movement.
Can I have a second? Second by trustee Marshazga. Please call the roll.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, this is probably a good spot before we get into lead and Burke and all the good stuff, to take up the new business and our resident that's here. I'm out of order now, so I have to buzz up here. Okay. Ann, if you would walk us through this while I'm
Sure. So you have two items on your agenda related to the same topic, which is a request to construct a 5-foot-tall black wrought iron style aluminum fence to encroach in the street yard of the property at 148 Maplewood Road. The property owners, one of whom is here today, the Geekins, purchased the property in November of 2022. They submitted a building permit application to build the fence in their yard. With it being a corner lot, the majority of the yard is actually located in the street yard. Since the zoning ordinance prohibits fences in street yards, the Geekins were advised that they could apply for a variation. They did submit that application. It was considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission on December 28th, and the Planning and Zoning Commission found that not all of the criteria were met, and so they recommended denial of the variation. At the same time, the Geekins did request, and that's the second separate item in your memo under new business item B, an ADA accommodation for their daughter. And because the criteria for a variation do not include any kind of physical limitations of the residence, that criteria was not considered in the variation request, and so there is a separate consideration of that request.
Thank you. Would you like to address the board
I
before we
would.
start?
Yes,
Please.
thank you. Good evening, Board of Trustees. Thanks for having me. My name is Tawny Geekin, and I'm here on behalf of myself, my husband Mike, and our two daughters, Grace and Claire. They are 5 and 7 years old, And we purchased our home in September here in Riverside. Actually, we relocated from Oregon. My husband grew up in LaGrange, and my grandfather actually grew up here in Riverside in the 30s, so we were drawn to this area and its beauty and the wonderful old homes. We were really excited to get our hands on one. We love the large lot that we purchased on the corner of Maplewood and Woodside, But we realized soon after moving in that Woodside is a pretty busy street and our corner is fairly busy. We frequently see police officers parked right outside our house catching speeders. And our daughters and our dog love to spend time in the yard, and our concern is that without a fence, their safety is in jeopardy. We worry about our daughters chasing a ball out onto Woodside Road and getting hit by a car, obviously, or a car jumping the curb. Not that a fence would necessarily stop them from getting into the yard, but it's just a concern. Since we've moved in, we've really realized how busy the road is. We care a lot about the home and the property and the aesthetic of the neighborhood, so we've chosen a fence that you can essentially see through. We have large hedges that line the property, and we plan to place the fence inside that hedge line so that from outside of the property, from Woodside, for example, the fence would be greatly concealed by the hedge line. And we just hope that we can come to some sort of agreement that we can possibly have a fence in our yard to keep our children safe. And I appreciate you guys considering that.
Thank you, Ms. Geekin.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience would like to speak on this matter? Okay, hearing none. Well, that will be the second.
Oh,
Yeah. Any comments on Ms. Geekin's fence? Any questions before I throw my 2 cents in? Okay. Don't say I didn't ask. We've now seen 2 of these in the past 12 months, and both of them have been on what is collector streets in this town. We have carved out in our code that we allow this on 26th Street and 31st Street because there are also collector streets. So according to IDOT traffic count, 31st Street carries about 10,300 cars a day. 26th Street carries about 12,700 cars a day. Des Plaines carries about 12,000 cars a day. Our KLOA study concluded that Maplewood to Maplewood, so north to south, carries about 75 cars a day, with First to Town on Forest at 8,062. Those are 2 of the busiest streets that we have in town. They're also 2 of the fastest streets. Woodside's average speed is 30 to 35. Forest is 32 to 34. This was such a concern to our traffic studies. They advised us to put in parking boxes on both streets to calm speed, also putting in a speed control sign, which I believe is right outside your door, and bringing the speed down to 20. I think even your personal circumstances aside, children, dogs, whatever, I think a home that is on a corner of these streets, and I'm only talking about Forest and Woodside. And if I could, I know people say, oh my God, you're going to put every house in the, every house, every corner is going to want a fence. Well, that's why I'm really talking about the streets that are the busy ones, and these are the only 2 that are this busy. So it would be carved out to just Woodside and Forest. And if my math is correct, there are only 3 houses on Woodside that would be eligible to get this out of 1,200 or 1,300 feet on both sides. There is one on the corner of Woodside and Maplewood North that has a very similar to you with a hedgerow. You have the one that's your house, which has a hedgerow. And then you have the one that's your across the street neighbor, which has a 8-foot hedgerow. So there's obviously, they put this hedgerows up to give them some privacy and also give them some definitions. So I think there's a compelling case to make that we allow, that we make a text amendment that allow fences that are designed like the one that you're designing. I will say I do have an issue with 5 feet.
Okay.
4 feet is the standard.
Okay.
And you're welcome to come by my house. I have this exact fence at 4 feet.
you?
Yeah, and.
And you like it?
I love it. And I
That
was.
is something we're flexible on. I believe in the backyard, homes are allowed to have a fence up to 6 feet, so we felt like we kind of consider this our backyard, but we
But
could
that-
compromise.
So I believe there's a compelling case to say that a metal side yard fence in these 4 properties, or actually 3, because one of them has put up a 6-foot tall wood fence because we didn't allow it at that time, is warranted. And I would also like to say that I would want this to also state that you have to run it on the inside of the bushes at least 5 feet. It would have to be the fence that you showed us, and that fence would then carry over to the other properties. And that as time goes, those bushes need to be maintained, and if something dies, you need to replace them.
Yes.
Even though we do not allow bushes in the street yards, we don't allow fences in the street yard. So if we can make the fence argument, we can make the bush argument. And I believe at the end of the day, no one would even know that fence is there.
That's the hope.
So that's my thought. So I would rather do this as a variation than moving on to the ADA, but that's me. Ms. Clarity?
If you're finished.
I am finished.
I'll just weigh in. I respect the findings of the PZC, but I'm inclined to agree with President Ballerine. When I go through the conditions needed to be satisfied for a variation, if I go through the standards that the PZC didn't believe were met here, I find a reasonable argument that they have been met. I think that there is a particular physical or unusual condition to this specific property, given its location and the amount of traffic. The conditions upon which the petition is based would not be applicable generally to other property. Again, I agree with Trustee Ballerine that this is a limited population set of properties that would have that unique condition, and so I don't think it is generally applicable. Another standard that the PZC did not find that was met here was that the variation should not be detrimental to the public welfare. Their reasoning here was to protect open vistas, which is important to me. The subject property, I don't think, beautiful property, beautiful home, not really the subject of a vista in the way that we think about them in Riverside. And that goes similarly to the other reason that it was not met. The PZC found that the standard was not met because it would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. That's a nice concession if you're willing to consider 4 feet. It's a nice compromise, I think, if we're willing to agree to enhance it with shrubbery or something like that. But I even without that, I don't find that that standard was not met. And so my personal view is that there is grounds for a variance here.
Anybody else?
Amber Dean was first.
Ms. Marshaga?
Yes, okay, so I actually respectfully disagree with Trustee Clarity on that. I feel that the Planning and Zoning Commission's rationale and analysis and the evidence that they heard and the standards and the way that they applied them were entirely correct. However, as much as I struggle from a historic preservation standpoint with allowing fences in street yards just from the Olmstedian perspective, I actually think that Trustee Ballerine's, President Ballerine's suggestion is a very creative one and a way that allows us to avoid setting terrible precedent with variances. Because if we were to, overturn this and do this as a basis, as a variance example to say, corner lots are subject to this, then other people in any other part of town could come in and say, I live on a busy street too, and I need a fence in my yard. And it is a slippery slope. And these variances do set precedent, and it's bad precedent. But if we do a text amendment, is very narrowly tailored and specifies the material of the fence, specifies that it's on an interior of a hedgerow, and lists the addresses which would be subject to, receiving this after, analysis and sharing of evidence, of statistics, of speed, of, traffic count for these 2 connector streets and these 4 specific properties, or however many there are. That avoids having it be attempted to be replicated elsewhere in the village. And to me, that is an important outcome. I would also like to see if there's any way we can get that speed lowered to 20 all the way down the street on Woodside.
We are working on it. We're working on it with both we did some work today that we're allowed up to 500 feet. So we have to, that's 500 feet from the church in and 500 feet from the school out. So I think we're going to be able to do that, but we'll have to study that a little bit more. But we're working on it, very close. Mr. Pollack.
I am open to considering a text amendment, directing the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm skeptical whether we can craft that in a way that would work, but certainly would keep an open mind, and there's no harm in having our Planning and Zoning Commission have a public hearing and getting input on a text amendment. As far as a variation, I have a lot of concerns. I think that overall, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended denial, finding that it did not meet the findings of fact, and I can understand that we all reserve the right to disagree, but in this case where it's unanimous, I think that's pretty compelling. A lot of different things were mentioned. The hedges as some kind of benefit, that the hedgerow being there. And certainly in the short run, that may hide it, but I'll remind everyone, and staff can correct me if staff clarified that for me today, those hedges are non-conforming, or legally non-conforming. If 20% or more of those are removed or damaged or died, they all have to be removed under our code. So I don't know that it's really appropriate to use the hedges as a mitigating factor here. And that gives me the opportunity to remind everyone that open streetscapes is a foundational, a fundamental aspect of the Olmsted Plan. We had a code until recently that said you couldn't park your car in the front yard. And we now have a code that says you can't have a hedgerow unless it's historical and it's been there a while, and even then it can be phased out, and if it gets damaged or dies, you have to eliminate it at a certain point. So keeping an open streetscape is pretty foundational to this village and its historic landmark status. That's another advantage of the text amendment, I think, is the Historic Preservation Commission would weigh in, if I'm not correct, yeah. So that would give us the opportunity to get their feedback on this issue. Going back directly to the variation, I looked at the yard. I did some rough calculations on our GIS system. They have the opportunity, if they want, to fence their backyard without a variation, and that would result in a roughly 2,500 square foot backyard fenced in, with direct access into the house, not where you have to go outside the house and then into the fenced area like we had in another case. It's a pretty big backyard. It's a decent-sized backyard. So to me, that relates to the hardship question. Is the property unusable without granting relief? I would say no. They have a backyard that can be fenced. I understand, and they testified at the Planning Commission that that's mostly concrete, but concrete can be removed if they don't want the concrete. So I'm having a hard time seeing that there's a true hardship there or anything unique about the property. Corner lots are throughout the village on busy streets, not so busy street. Riverside Drive would be the next one where people say, well, that's a pretty busy street. Got a lot of corner lots, let's fence in those side yards. And finally, even if we were to say that it meets the standards for variation, again, I don't think it does, but even if we were to say that, I think that legally we're obligated to give the minimum relief necessary to resolve the hardship. And that would mean maybe we allow them to move the fence 10 feet, or my idea would be that if it would match the setback of the house to the north, because that would be in spirit with the streetscape concepts in the Olmsted plan, is to keep an open streetscape. So, you know, I don't see any justification to move it all the way out beyond that, or beyond what's allowed by code, and under any circumstances, not beyond what the setback of the house to the north. Again, I think, you know, when we decide there's a hardship and a unique condition about a property, I think we should be looking at what is the minimum relief needed to resolve that hardship. And clearly, taking the fence all the way close to the property line is beyond the minimum relief. And again, I don't want to downplay my original thoughts that they do have an opportunity to fence in their backyard to code in a reasonable fashion. So I cannot support a variation. I would be open to a motion to remand this to planning and zoning for a text amendment consideration.
Joe? I'm in favor of a text amendment that will allow a 4-foot fence for those specified addresses. So I'm asking, do you want a motion on this or a consensus? Oh,
Ms. Evans, please.
So I agree with the commission's findings. The application showed little indication of hardship or practical difficulty regarding the lot. And also, as Doug had mentioned, there is no barrier to building a fence that doesn't require a variance in your yard. And I did see your yard, and it's pretty good size in the back between the house and the garage. So I think that would put the play area even further back from the street, which would meet one of your goals and
Yes, but
take
it's
care
all
of one of your
cement.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do agree with Trustee Pollock that we should consider minimum relief at least.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm looking for is either a motion to approve or deny the variance.
I'll make a motion to deny the variance.
Motion to deny. Can I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Evans, second by Trustee Pollock. Now, just so you know, in order to overturn, you need 4 trustees, and I can't vote. Okay? So you need a supermajority. If you could please call the roll.
So this is for a motion to affirm planning and zoning?
Correct,
To
yeah,
affirm,
this
I'm
is a
sorry.
motion to affirm the
Thank you.
denial.
So yes vote would be to deny.
Right. Correct. And the yes vote would be to deny the variance.
Right, you're affirming planning and zoning.
Correct.
Okay. Trustee Evans?
Yes.
Trustee Gallegos?
no.
Trustee Clarity?
No.
Trustee Marshazga?
Yes.
Trustee Hannan?
Vote to affirm.
Trustee Pollock?
Agreed, yes.
So your variation has failed.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm up next too, so should I stay here?
So we will move on to the second, and that is consideration of the fence.
If I
Go
may,
ahead.
is there going to be, I wrote some notes that someone wanted to make a motion related to a text amendment. Is no one making that motion?
Oh, I'll make that motion, that we remand to planning and zoning for consideration of a text amendment for the specific properties that are corner lots. Do you have the addresses?
No, and it's not really a remand, it's just directing Planning and Zoning Commission to
Review a
consider
text
proposed text amendments.
Okay.
Based on the busyness of the streets along Woodside, Des Plaines and Forest, and the corner lots situated on that. And I guess those lots would need to be identified as part of the process.
Yes, Mr. Pollock?
I don't see any harm in a broader direction to the Planning and Zoning Commission, just to have them review our regulations and make recommendations regarding fences and street yards. They'll have the benefit of our minutes, so they'll know what we're concerned about, but then they'll have a wide open opportunity to comprehensively look at our fence regulations and our street yard regulations.
Okay. Mr. Gannon?
I would be against that. I like the specific text amendment based on the traffic study of the corners that were specifically identified in our discussion, rather than a open discussion. The variations that have come in front of us several times have been on the busy streets that were identified in the traffic study. I think that's the issue that's prompting a need for multiple requests for a variation based on similar facts is the traffic in the area as opposed to corner lots per se. So, you know, if this is going to go back to planning and zoning, I'd like it not go back, be submitted to planning and zoning. I'd like it limited to the streets and corners that we identified.
Okay. Would you want to make a motion to that effect?
I'd make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
We didn't.
Wait,
make the motion
wait.
already?
Okay.
Trustee Marshall
I
already.
make a motion,
Okay.
but I didn't finish making the motion because I was looking for specific addresses.
Okay,
And-
sorry.
And I agree with Trustee Hannan that it should be specific to those two streets.
So-
So I will make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider text amendment regarding corner lots on Forest and Woodside, and the degree to which and the type and style of fence which might be considered. I'll stop.
Can you identify the addresses on that when it sends down to planning and zoning?
Can we just plug them in later for
Like,
those
Sure,
corner lots?
yes. Are we including, I don't know where Woodside turns into Des Plaines, but
You would,
So-
well, you'd go to the
31st.
31st Street, 31st Street to the end.
got it.
So we're really focused in on Woodside, but Maplewood area.
And the other side of Maplewood is the church, so,
Yep.
okay. So we have a motion from trustee Marshazga and a second by trustee Hannan. If you would please call the roll.
Certainly. Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Galagos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan. Trustee Polly.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Now we move on to the next, and let me ask you a question to the lawyers. Is it best for the applicant to wait till after the planning and zoning meeting before making this address? Because if for some reason it's approved as an ADA, it would follow her child, whereas variation doesn't have that limitations?
Right, that would be up to her, so.
Okay. So do you understand what I just said?
Somewhat, but we just want a fence so our kids can be safe in our yard as soon as we can get one. I would prefer to move forward with the second request, I
Okay.
guess, and if in the future the rules are changed, that would only benefit us, I guess. There's no
Okay.
reason not to proceed.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we have a consideration of the same fence under an ADA accommodation. Would you like to speak to that?
Sure, I'll just briefly explain our younger daughter, Claire, who's 5 years old. She's a kindergartner at Central Elementary, was born with profound hearing loss in her right ear. That's also referred to as single-sided deafness, so she can only hear normally from one ear. And that presents many challenges to a person with single-sided deafness, but one of them particularly is the ability to localize sound. In order to know which direction sound is coming from, a person needs two hearing ears. So for example, if Claire was near a road and a car was coming, she wouldn't necessarily be able to tell which direction it was coming from. Or if someone shouted out to her to watch out or be careful, she might not know where that shout was coming from. It would take her longer to respond. That amount of time could be deadly in an emergency situation. So, so we are requesting a fence, a reasonable accommodation, which we feel is fencing a portion of our yard. About half of the grassed area where the children play is what we would like fenced, and we hope that you will consider it.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Pollak.
I have a question. Why does the permitted location of a fence not meet that need? Why doesn't it accommodate that situation?
Well, it's driveway right now.
The
It's
driveway could be
concrete.
removed, right?
Yes, yes, I guess that was not an expense we were prepared to undertake.
So it's a financial reason that you don't want a fence that limited to that area?
Yes, and we want the children to be able to enjoy the full yard. It's beautiful, and it's a child's dream, right? We want them to be able to enjoy the entire yard, or at least a larger portion of it. We'd like to have swings, you know, and playthings for them, and yeah, the area that we would be permitted to fence right now is concrete.
Joe, I have a question for the petitioner. Do you have a deaf child sign outside of your house for?
We do not, no.
Okay. Then I have another question. Are we allowed to postpone it to a date certain until after we get back from the planning and zoning? Could we postpone this?
We could, but she would like to,
I
she would like us
understand
to go
that,
ahead.
but I would rather that we go through the right way. I mean, you're not going to dig your ground right now in the middle of
No,
winter.
that's true, that's true. I don't know how long it would take.
I think
yeah.
you kind of heard what the consensus of the board is on the previous motion.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask that you take a look at the cooperation that you very well might get handed to you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm new to the process, so if that's
Well,
what
I think
you all would
what you
recommend.
said earlier is you don't have, and correct me if I'm wrong, the fence that you're proposing under the ADA is the same fence.
Yes.
In the same location.
Yes.
So she has no reason not to at least get a vote on it, because the worst-case scenario is she would lose, and then it goes down to planning and zoning, and she could be taken up again.
Right.
So there's really no reason that doesn't make, unless you want to not do it because you're waiting for planning and zoning's input. So then that one you can vote against it.
Well, I would just rather put it through properly.
It
I mean,
is-
I would be in favor of the fence, period, but
Through ADA, this is, so.
Right, the issues are kind of different. The zoning is one thing and the
No, I understand
disability
that.
is another.
Yes, Mr. Hannon.
As I understand the ADA accommodation, the fence would stay, if we granted it, the fence would stay in place only for so long as the child was resident in the home. Is that correct?
Correct.
I don't, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Can I continue?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
Anything?
My apologies. I spoke out of turn.
That's fine.
I will miss this.
I don't share the concern about the relative size of the fenced-in area to accommodate the ADA situation. I'm assuming that that's in the judgment of, what would accommodate this based on, what you've done, your discussions, in caring for a child with this, medical situation. I'd be inclined, given the limited scope, to grant the accommodation at this time, given the unique nature. Obviously, if they were to sell the house, if they were to, move, that fence would need to come down. So I think this is very child-specific. I think it's a safety issue in light of the ADA situation, and feel pretty strongly that this should be granted.
Okay, would you like to, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have some concerns with this proceeding under the ADA. Just so you know, I have 2 of my 3 children have disabilities under the ADA, so I am very familiar with this. I also live on a corner lot, and I managed to raise them all without a fence. One of the things that I think is problematic about trying to reach the result that you want with a fence through the ADA is that, or the Fair Housing Act for that matter, is that there is required to be not only that your child has a disability, a legal disability, which of course nobody is questioning. She also has a cochlear implant to address the hearing loss in the one ear, which is fine. But there must be a reasonable nexus or relationship between the disability and the modification or the accommodation that you're seeking. That has to be there. And I've looked at all these homeowners association cases where, people were asserting that fences were needed. And the types of things that were happening was, it was an autistic child or a child with a global development disorder that was a flight risk. I mean, elopement is a term that was used in these doctors' letters to say, this child needs this, they need to be fenced in because they're a flight risk, they're a runner. And that information was not part of your daughter's diagnosis. It was not part of her IEP at school. The schools are not required to fence her in.
No.
So this is not, in my opinion, as much as I empathize, it is not appropriate.
But combined with the busy road, I think it's the hearing impairment combined with the busyness
Which is
of the road,
why
which
I
we
think you
already
would be
discussed.
better served by a text amendment if that is what planning and zoning and preservation think is appropriate. I think there is a concern with the traffic counts and with the speed on those two roads. We've seen that. But I don't want to get into a situation of setting bad precedent where someone says, oh, I'm 86 and I have hearing loss and I need a fence in my corner yard. It just, when you try to loop it in in a way in which it isn't tied to the problem that we have, which is the speed and the safety conditions and the traffic counts in these particular locations. I just am not comfortable doing that.
I will just say that initially, we only requested a variation. It was only at the advice of the team here that the idea of an ADA accommodation was even proposed. I had never even thought of it. And if it supports my children having a safe place to play, then I'm going to do it. But that was not the initial, we never even thought about Claire's hearing loss at first as a justification for this fence. We just want our children to be safe, and I don't think that that's too much to ask when you've purchased a huge home and a lot in a beautiful area, and all you want to do is preserve the beauty of that and keep your family safe.
Ms. Clary.
Thank you. Just to tackle a few things from Trustee Marshaska's comments. I've heard a lot about precedential value here tonight, and I understand that, and I believe it's incumbent upon us to be consistent and to apply the rules. We're talking about special circumstances. We're talking about a variance tonight and an ADA accommodation. I'm not troubled by I'm not troubled by this as a bad precedent to begin with, but necessarily in a similar circumstance, those are going to come before an elected board who can have this level of fact-finding and discussion. So I'm not troubled by the precedential value of either of these resolutions. Second, I find that there is a very satisfactory nexus between the request for ADA and the remedy. I find that remedy to be reasonable. I understand your argument that in other cases it's more a consideration of keeping a child in, but I believe that the unique characteristics of that particular property warrant a fence here. What we've seen circumstances in the village where cars are careening in and out of yards and off of trees. What's to stop a car from careening off of the road into her yard? And a child with that circumstance would not have the same reaction time that another child would. So to me, that is more than satisfactory with respect to a nexus. Lastly, I feel that there is a fundamental difference between school and home. I respect the argument, but at school, particularly at Central, those children are fairly isolated. There is adult supervision. It's a different circumstance. I believe this child and this family has every right to feel safe in their home and that they should get to enjoy their backyard and the beauty of their yard, and I think this request is reasonable.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I do have a question. When we send this over for a text amendment, when does it get back to us for a vote on that?
Would come
For,
back
for,
to-
for the text?
Yeah.
What's the date that we would be discussing that on?
I estimated April 20th, because remember, planning and zoning will have to have discussion.
Okay.
And then they'll have to do, if they agree that it should be a text amendment, then it has to have a public hearing. So we have to do public notification, and then it would have to come back to the board. And planning and zoning does not have a meeting in February. So everything would be delayed till March. So April 20th is probably best case scenario, but the likelihood is we're probably looking at May.
If somebody wants a deaf child sign placed outside of their house, as is needed here, I would say, what do they have to do to get that?
You know what, I'd have to look at our process, because I've never gotten that request before. I'm assuming it would be something that we would be doing administratively.
Well, it's a matter of setting precedent. Oh.
We need to ask the stakeholder if they're
If
interested
that's something
in-
you're interested in, please.
I would
you
have to
can-
discuss that with
yeah.
my
You
husband.
can take
From our
that up
daughter's
with them.
perspective, I don't know that she would want her hearing impairment advertised to the entire community.
Well, I think it's more for her safety than anything else.
Right.
And that's the reason why you're here.
Right, I
to get the
understand, but I
fences for her
feel
safety
like
and-
that's a decision my husband and I would have to think it over.
But the-
Thank you.
Yeah, the sign's not going to stop a car. But go ahead, Miss Evans. We'll call this meeting back to order. Miss Evans, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about the fence that you could have. The fence, if you wanted to build a fence that was allowed, that you didn't require a variance for in your
Yes.
yard, that would solve your problems, right? The concerns about your
Well-
dog getting out, or your concerns about your daughter running into the street, or even the fence would be even further from the street too. So even
Right,
if
but
a car.
why purchase a half an acre lot when you can only your children can only play in a third of that? It
Right, but
just-
our
to
ordinance
me-
doesn't say, unless you buy a house with a big yard, then you can have a bigger fence. That's not what the ordinance says. So your plans need to follow what the ordinance says.
Yes, and we have done a workup of what that fence would look like if we wanted to build one that is permitted. We're fully prepared to consider that if we need to. It just seems like a waste of our financial resources to fence in such a small portion when our daughters play in the larger yard every day. To tell them, you can only play in this part of the yard, not this big, beautiful area with the tree swing and the grass.
I mean, they can still play in the bigger part of the yard, right?
But they wouldn't be safe.
I mean, I don't
as
have
safe
a
as
fence
they
in my
could.
front yard, and, I mean, my kids haven't got it.
Yes, I understand.
what
Everybody's
you're saying.
situation is unique.
I understand what you're saying.
But I'm just here advocating for my family. That's all I can do.
I just wanted to let you know that you still have a
Yes,
possibility
we're
for
aware.
a safe
Yep,
place.
yep,
for you. Yeah.
fully aware. Thank you.
I would like to remind everybody that we use that argument on Forest, and we have a 6-foot tall fence, which is not what we want. But we've
I mean-
used that argument before. But
That's another point. I mean, we can't just pick and choose when we're going to follow the ordinance.
I'm not-
You're right. We last considered and declined a corner lot request for a home on Forest that was much, much more exposed than yours is. And the resident also had a dog and child. So we do need to be fair and consistent.
Mr. Hannan,
I'm confused. You keep talking about following the planning and zoning ordinance. This is an ADA accommodation, which is not covered by that ordinance. She's asking for an accommodation under the ADA. This has nothing to do with the prior request that had, on Forest, that had no ADA accommodation component. So, I want to make sure that the two arguments stay separate and distinct. We've already discussed planning and zoning and what the zoning code says. Right now, we're discussing something completely different on what's an ADA accommodation. I just want to make that clear before we take a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Hannan. Any other comments? Yes. Mr. Mars.
Yeah, there was some talk about precedent, and my understanding is that these, because these are so highly fact-specific, that there is no legal precedent set, either from a zoning or a disability-related standpoint. It doesn't mean you don't want to be consistent, but I think each reasonable accommodation would be taken on its facts.
Are you saying that it wouldn't open the door for other people with hearing impairments
They
on
could
corner
certainly
lots to-
apply, absolutely.
They certainly could.
Yes.
And they will.
But, okay. And look, can I just make one point? I just don't want to get lost in the weeds. With the ADA, even though it is ADA, if someone makes a motion, I would think that it would be beneficial if we remove that fence height to 4 feet and still ask for the screening as we did before.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
4 feet.
So we have a motion to approve under the ADA Act that the fence can be placed at 4 feet with the proper screening 5 feet from the line. I have a second by Trustee Clarity. And in this case, I believe I am available to vote, correct?
That is correct.
Trustee Evans.
No.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
No.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
No.
President Ballerine.
Aye. Motion carries. And we will be remanding it back to the planning and zoning for the text amendment also. But that has nothing to do with you. Yes, Mr. Pollock?
A couple questions. The motion did not include any restrictions, as Trustee Hannan had referenced. It did not include, and I don't know if it was implied or, nothing that says it was, when it has to be removed.
Okay.
And I think before when we did this, we specifically, I believe we may have even had them record a covenant, record something on the title, that it has to be removed at a certain point in time. That was not in the motion. I'm wondering if that's not included or not.
It would have to ride with the child. I think that was discussed, but
Okay. So it was implied, everyone's,
Was that implied
that was
in your
everybody's
second?
understanding that it will be removed.
okay.
But when does it have to be removed?
When the child leaves the house.
The child no longer resides at the house, and then does it get recorded? So that future, if the property is sold, before that happens, a new buyer would be aware that that fence has to be removed. I think we've done that in the past.
So we'll be bringing back an ordinance at the next meeting that memorializes
Good.
these things, and we can add a
Okay.
recording sheet to
I
that.
didn't understand that. I thought that this was the end of. Second thing I just wanted to mention, for the sake of the property owner, they cannot put more hedgerows in the street yard. That's not permitted by code. And they can't, I don't believe, and Planner Siren, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe playground equipment or anything like that is permitted in the street yard.
That's an excellent question.
Something
I
to
will-
check
Okay,
before
I'll
you
check
do
it out.
anything.
That I will
Before you put
confirm.
anything in there so you don't get in trouble.
All right.
I think that pretty much has to just stay green.
Okay.
But check with our planner, she could help you with that.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
ma'am. We appreciate you coming in. Yes, Mr.
We do
Hannan.
have somebody I know is going to comment on the banner policy. Can we move to that next to save some
Sure.
little time on behalf of our esteemed leader of the local Boy Scouts?
Okay, I could do that. You guys are testing my, my. Where is the banner?
That is me.
9-9.
Discussion on banner policy
9I, discussion on banner policy
and village communications.
and village communications. What page is that on in the? What page? 441. Thank you. .441. Okay. Ms. Francis, if you would.
Certainly. The village board staff initially brought before the board in January a modification to the banner policy to incorporate village communications as it relates to social media. The board was not inclined to make that modification and had asked that village staff bring back the original banner policy. Upon review and reflection after that village board meeting, staff compiled the banner request. The board had only requested from 2022. We pulled 2022 and 2021. And then also a broader discussion started happening at the staff level as it related to village communications based on the board's feedback from the previous meeting about only focusing in our communications strictly on village activities or village-sponsored activities. One of the things that are of note is that some of these different things are closely intertwined. And while the banner policy has been very separate and distinct, the board's discussion flowed into village communications. And so staff wanted to make the board aware that as we're discussing more of village communications, which implies our social media, our e-flash and things of that sort, our Economic Development Commission has decided to allow that particular Facebook page to go dormant and to start funneling things through the village Facebook page. If we're starting to restrict that and not do anything as it relates to outside village activities, then that would preclude certain notifications that we've done that have been incorporated as part of our marketing and branding that we've done with showcasing different businesses, progress updates on Sherwin-Williams, for example. And so the list goes on and on. For those that were on the board at that time, we did a marketing and branding project in which really Economic Development Commission took the lead and really focused on marketing businesses, community members, and events. And also a key piece of that was really showcasing the events, which also closely dovetails the banners and what's going on throughout the village. And so that's why staff created this in kind of a two-prong approach, because it's really hard to approach one item without the other. And so we wanted the board to at least have some sort of draft communications policy, because if the board decides to then change the banner policy as it relates to what can be displayed in Guthrie and Centennial, then a broader discussion as it relates to village communications and what the board wants to see also on social media needs to be addressed as well.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Do we have anyone that would like to speak from the audience before we start? Yes, sir, please.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. My name is John Flaherty. I'm a resident here for, going on 22 years now. Active member of the community and member of several organizations that take great benefit in the banner policy. Our Boy Scout Troop 24 is having their pancake breakfast first Saturday of March. So if you're in town, please stop by. But the banner policy, or the banner that we display there for, I think it's a week prior to the breakfast, is very beneficial and really is a cornerstone for our advertising and marketing of that event, as well as member of the Knights of Columbus. We also use that opportunity for the spaghetti dinner, pasta dinner that we hold. I know it's an opportunity for several of the organizations, be it spaghetti dinners, pancake breakfasts, chicken dinners, and whatnot. And I'd just ask the board to maintain the policy as it is, and that it provides a great opportunity for some of these smaller organizations to provide that information to the general community of Riverside about their particular events. So I thank you all for, I did write a letter, I think all of you have seen it, and I appreciate the responses that I received from everyone, and just ask you to consider maintaining the policy as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. Any comments from the board? Yes, Ms. Evans.
I wanted to ask a question about the materials. We have the social media strategy for the EDC Facebook page.
Correct. That's an older strategy that they had outlined back in 2019.
Right. Is the page going dormant or not?
So that page is going dormant, and they have directed staff that they want the showcase to be our Village of Riverside Facebook page. And so that's what we've been doing. So we've incorporated kind of this as our fundamental basis of kind of the things that you've been seeing over the past year and doing our best to kind of incorporate that based on their guidance.
As for the banner policy, is there any taste to change it as it, other than it was? Ms. Clarity?
I've spoken to a number of residents this week on this issue, and I'm so happy to hear from our residents, and thank you very much for your message and your comments. I think this is a case where I learned a lot about the value of the banners and how critical they are to everyone's passing along of information. So I am compelled by that feedback and an understanding with respect to the banners there. I also just say, as part of the feedback that I received in talking to residents, more than one resident was very complimentary of our village staff and their ability to process these requests and get them up and approved in a timely manner. And so I just want to take the opportunity to thank our village staff for managing that in a way that makes you look really great to our residents.
Mr. Hannan?
One question I'd have, and I'd love to impose upon Mr. Flaherty for his feedback. We allow up to 4, and I'm wondering if that is, if we reduce that to 2, obviously anything with parks and recreation or village events would not be subject to that limitation, but having other tax-exempt entities, getting sort of 2 announcements per year, to me seems reasonable. But I know, John, you're involved with Knights of Columbus, you're involved with Boy Scouts. Would that create a hardship, or is 2, you guys have 2 fundraising events that would accommodate you? Just would love to understand your reaction to that.
Sure, thank you. The Boy Scouts, we have basically one activity a year, and that's the pancake breakfast. We have a smaller thing that is in coordination, pizzas on 4th of July, but we don't advertise that. We're just in the tent doing that. Same thing with the Knights of Columbus. We do our pasta dinner, which again, we're doing again this year. We're back after COVID in April, the Saturday after Easter. So again, if you're in here, in the community, please come and join us for homemade pasta and meatballs, but it is one event. So I think it's a great point you make, Mr. Hannan, that a lot of these organizations, we have kind of one event to fund our organization for the year. And this is we don't have big budgets to do advertising in the Landmark or other local entities like that. And we don't have big social media presence. Our mission statement at the Scouts does not incorporate a lot of social media work. Same with the Knights of Columbus. So while there is, and a lot of residents are not on social media. So that's, this is an opportunity. And from my perspective, it's very limited to people who are simply driving down the street, which are primarily Riverside residents. So it's not, like a huge social media thing where it's going to go out to the entire world, but it's limited to us here in Riverside. So I think 2 is fine. We only use it, the organizations that I belong to use it once a year for those events. So I think, I guess I would have no objection, not that I'm.
That was good feedback. I appreciate it. That was helpful.
And I don't see anybody using it multiple times other than one applicant.
Right.
There's a list, you can see.
I'm looking at it.
They're
They're the only ones that have used it 4 times. Everyone else is usually
I'd
within
inclined to
2.
limit it to 1 or 2.
Floss uses it twice.
Yeah, 1 or 2.
Or 2. 2 is.
I like the banners. I do disagree with you in one aspect, because there's, as I stated earlier, there's 12,000 people that come down Des Plaines and come into our town. So I think the banners see a lot of people coming out of Loyola, going through the thing. But I don't see it as those people kind of come to the pancake breakfast. I see it as those banners show a vibrancy for our community. Shows how engaged our community are with the residents and the visitors. And I think, the more the stuff we publicize up there, and more people see it, I think it's great. And I think it's great for visitors to come through and see this stuff, because You know, it does say a lot about our community. There's always something going on. I mean, you could tell by this list, there's always something going on, which is great. For a community this size, it's wonderful. So I would agree with Trustee Hannan that I believe 2 would be sufficient for most places. I also would hate to you know, limit some of these things because, you know, you limit the Cub Scouts and then we go to the Boy Scouts when we need to have our light poles painted. You know,
Well, technically, we are 2 different organizations.
Well, I know,
so
but
maybe-
eventually-
Maybe we'll still get our 4.
eventually your Cub Scouts become Boy Scouts.
They do.
You know, we're a small community and we work hand in hand with a lot of these organizations, whether they're the churches, whether they're the Cub Scouts, whether they're the swim club. I think it's important for us to keep our communications and work hand in hand to get as far as we can. Any other discussion on the banners? Yes.
May I just ask a question? I just want to make sure I'm crystal clear that the 4 limitation that it is now, or the 2 that we're discussing, only applies to non-village, like Parks and Rec
Park,
wouldn't
yeah,
be
it would only
limited
be
in their
non-village.
number of very many banners.
Yeah, it would only be non-village speak.
Thank you.
Ms. Aberdeen?
Yes,
Ms. Aberdeen.
I would just like to reiterate that I am very much in favor of the banners as a form of communication and having our community engage with the different civic groups that we have. And I don't see any reason, if staff is comfortable in suggesting that the policy say 4, I don't see any point in limiting potential, you know, usage to 4. I mean, to down to 2, in other words. You could be limiting some great 3rd event that is a new event for, you know, you just give yourself more flexibility if you go with what staff is comfortable with. So I would be in favor of keeping it at 4.
Okay. I want to throw something, just a curveball out. And that is charging a nominal fee to facilitate the banners, whether it's, you know, I don't want to take away from fundraising, but it does take a lot of staff time to get out there, hang it, manage it, do all the thing. I mean, I'm talking nominal, $25, $30, just to cover a portion of our cost. That's just a thought.
Which might deter how many banners they put up per year.
Could possibly deter. But I don't want to make it to the point where it deters from an organization to do it. But I do think we need to have a responsibility to our residents to try to collect what we can for our staff time. Go ahead.
Just a question on that, does that add any complexity to your process?
No, because we have to.
Time consuming?
No, because they're already dropping off the banner, so, and they're submitting the application. I can talk to Director Johns and Director Tab of whether or not they can even submit that payment online when they're submitting their application. We would probably, now that I've said that, I take that back, because we want to review their application first to make sure that they qualify before actually taking whatever the fee may be. But they do drop off. We can make it as part of the requirement. When they drop off the banner, they're dropping off a check with whatever the fee is, and then we would process it accordingly. So there's not really any more touches to the organization.
I think in 2022, there were 28 requests, so if we're having a really banner year, we're talking about $900.
Ooh, unintended.
You've been working on that for all week, haven't you? Mr. Wade, hold on, I'm on this side of the table. Mr. Gallegos, you need to follow that.
I'm not at the meeting tonight. So I just have a question. Do we have so many requests for a banner? Do we have to turn them away or have a shorter window for them to be displayed?
Well, I will direct that to Director Tab because he administers the program, but my initial inclination is we figure out a rotation to try to accommodate all the different groups, but.
Yeah. Director Tab has been challenging for you.
We have a lot of overlap with 2 spots to hang them, and the organizations, if we, for some reason, have 3 at one time, they're all pretty reasonable with their timelines. Normally, we try to give them 2 weeks or as they request.
Okay.
2 weeks or less. Some request 1 week. I believe you guys are 1 week leading up to it. We don't have a whole lot of issues with having to reject somebody because there's not space.
Okay, then I'm fine with 4, as long as it becomes an issue.
Mr. Pollack?
I was just looking for the information. I know it's in the write-up, but could staff remind me, what's the length of time for each banner?
2 weeks?
2 weeks, 2 weeks,
So someone who...
or less. Somewhere.
2 weeks or less, so 4 times, that'd be 8 weeks with the same organization. I don't know if that matters to anyone, but I think that's relevant. Second, I'm not too inclined to charge a fee for it. I don't think it'd make any kind of impact, and it's kind of a public service that we provide.
Okay. Anything else?
You tell me.
Okay. I need a motion to try to, I need a motion to kind of put all of your consensuses together.
If we make a motion, can we make a motion on the fees, or is that
You
gonna
can make
be
a motion
different
on the
discussion?
fees, on the weeks, on the amount of time. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
you can
And-
tackle it one issue at a time, however you want to.
Yes, because it's to build consensus, because then we'll modify the policy and bring it back to you, whether it's in the form of the consent agenda at the next meeting.
Okay. So do we have a consensus on weeks? Does 2 weeks seem to be, that's the norm?
2 weeks here.
2 weeks? 2?
Sure.
2, okay. Fee?
Uh,
Doug says no?
I say no.
No fee.
No fee?
I would say if we're gonna leave it, if we're gonna give them 4 chances, or 4 uses of the banner, then we should include a fee.
A fee after 2?
No fee with 2. Like 2 is 2, but some are using it 6 times.
So free for your first 2 and a fee after that? Is that kind of what
I
you're
think we
saying?
should just do, if we're gonna allow them to use it 4 times, then we should impose a fee.
That's kind of what I'm saying. So-
Only, yeah, but if
so-
we're gonna let them use it 2 times, then let's not even
Okay.
bother with a fee.
So, all right. If I understand correctly.
But I guess they wouldn't
I
be
think
able
I
to
understand
predict if they're
correctly.
gonna
Do
use
we,
it.
is it going, what's the consensus on 2 weeks or 4 weeks? Or 2 times or 4 times?
4 times.
2 times.
Okay, I'm sorry. 2, 4.
Can I ask what 0 times? I don't think you're being
I meant no fee, period.
Well, we're not talking about fees. We're talking
Oh.
about,
Duration.
Just how many times you
we're
can,
talking how many times you could put the banner up, 2 or 4?
regardless of fee.
Regardless of fee, 4 is fine.
Okay, well, I got to start with Kristen because I'm not working on this one.
2.
2,
4.
4,
4.
4,
4.
4. 2. Just say 4 so that we got consensus. Okay. Now we get to the fee part. So do we, no fee or fee after 2?
Or fee every time.
Or fee every time? Thank you. So I'm starting back with you,
I'll say, let's impose a fee.
after 2,
No, every time.
every time, okay?
No fee at all.
No fee.
The fee would be minimal.
No fee.
No fee it is. So we have 2 weeks, 4 times, no fee. That's it?
So the policy
That's
remains the
essentially what
same.
you have now,
Oh.
so.
Fine.
Yeah, just,
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry you had to listen to everything just to remain the same, but, okay. Now we move on to the social media part of this.
This is very much a draft, to just begin the conversation, to make sure that staff is doing what the board envisions from a communication perspective on social media.
I believe our social media presence has done very well over the last year.
Okay.
Thank you.
I thought the policy draft looked good. Very well thought out.
I agree. Anybody else? Anybody have a question?
I like it as is.
Okay. Is clarity
Seems reasonable to me.
reasonable? The other side of the table?
I have no comment.
Reasonable, reasonable? Ms. Marshaska?
Let's see. These things are, it could be any one of these factors which enables the communication to go out. Shall only be published if one of the following criteria is met. Okay, yes, I'm in favor.
Okay. So we have a consensus on both the banner and the social media policy. But you're going to say something.
No, I know. I want to be very clear. That includes the program or event is sponsored by a not-for-profit, and it lists out the different organizations, whether we are members of or are not-for-profit agencies or organizations within the village. And then it includes the chamber, Visit Oak Park, and then also talks about other things that we would continue to promote. Just want the red stuff is really what I'm sorry, I should have been very specific.
Right.
What we wanted you to focus in on to
Chamber.
make sure we're comfortable.
Great, so the direction at the last meeting would have essentially eliminated the red items, correct, Jessica?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
I've heard, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just, in the several wonderful conversations I had with residents this week on this issue, residents were split on this, small population. Some feel that, like we discussed last week, social media really should just be limited to village information. Some were happy to have more information, and so if there's a consensus that this is reasonable, I'm okay with that. I'm also okay with an outcome where our social media is limited to village speak, to be revisited another time.
And I see Village Speak at the Friends of the Fourth, the West Suburban Recreation Association. Go ahead, you're tapping me. Go ahead.
So after the meeting, EDC met soon after that, and they discussed the social media issue, and they would like to have a little bit more flexibility in using our social media platforms for their purposes.
Well, that's number
Which
5, correct?
So that would be outside of, village-related, strictly village-related.
Sorry if I
Go ahead.
The concern by staff is EDC is really focused, especially over the last few years, about tourism. And so some of the things that staff members, including myself, have really focused on is, okay, where are people going to look at different tourism sites, and making sure that we have a presence on there, even if it's not, it's promoting our historical pieces, but there's also different locations like Higgins Glass, for an example. That's a destination spot, and so we want to make sure that that's featured on some of these other different travel sites. And so, but if the board is saying no, press pause, we're only doing village related events, then that stuff goes away. And so that's staff's concern, because we have EDC that's been very focused on Visit Oak Park and doing all these other pieces, and they're excited about how we're moving forward to make sure we have this present on other tourism and travel sites beyond Visit Oak Park. And so that's the concern of staff, is we want to make sure that we're in alignment with what EDC wants, but also very much so with what the village board wants.
Okay, I'm confused. We have 3, 4, and 5 here in red, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I don't think anybody is, and I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody has a problem with 4 and 5, because 5 is really the EDC plan, correct? Vacant storefronts, places to shop,
Yeah.
the Visitors Bureau, so I don't think anyone has a problem with 4 and 5.
Yeah.
I think the question is, of the first A through F, should all of these organizations be allowed to utilize our social media? And I believe Ms. Clarity had brought up once before about just too much. But go ahead, Ms. Aberdeen Marshaska.
Well, I was going to say, for some of these organizations, similar to the banner policy, residents may not ever know about community activities unless they hear about them through Facebook or whatever. And if you're not following a particular organization, you'll never get the notice, you'll never get the memo. So I believe that this does serve an important function for nonprofits to be able to, submit a request to the village to have that go out. And if people are uncomfortable with it being an outside organization, all we have to do is put a little disclaimer at the bottom of the announcement or the e-flash or whatever it is that, this is, not sponsored by the Village of Riverside. We do not endorse, X, Y, and Z. Like your standard little, 2-line disclaimer in tiny print. I think that might alleviate some of the concern.
Mr. Pollack, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go, Mr.
Well,
Pollack.
I don't see social media like that a lot, so I guess that would be something different.
Well, it's covered in e-flashes and other village communications at the beginning of the policy. So I guess it would apply to the Riverside Review newsletter, website, e-flashes, Riverside TV, press releases, signage and banners and water bill, but not social media. So I guess you're right, it would be a little odd unless we had the disclaimer on the main page of the village Facebook or whatever to say, to the extent that you see a community event sponsored by a nonprofit, please know that we are providing a service to all of our nonprofits and we are not endorsing a particular, whatever.
I see the West Suburban Recreation Association, WESRA. I don't see why that's in 3. I think that's village speak. That's recreation. I mean, to get that information out to our residents, especially our residents with children with disabilities, that's a service. Friends of the Fourth is, again, that's recreation. I personally have a problem with AB. I don't have I don't think things that aren't village, religious organizations and things like that, advertising on our social media pages is, I just think it just dilutes our social media, and it dilutes our e-flashes and things like that. But go ahead, Mr. Pollack.
I tend to agree that WESRA for sure would fall under number 4 because the village has a vested interest in that program. Friends of the Fourth, I believe we sponsor that. We contribute resources to that. So that, once again, is a semi-village sponsored event. So I can see those 2 organizations falling under number 4. I guess overall, I'm inclined to be inclusive maybe and try it. What I would want to see, though, is if we suddenly expand this the way we're talking about, I would want to monitor how many people delete their membership in eFlash, et cetera, because I think a lot of people would, if they suddenly started getting 3, 4, 5 e-flashes every week, they're going to either ignore them or just delete the account.
I feel like it's been a lot. It's been a lot.
So I'd want to monitor it. I'm open to maybe doing something, but I'd be very cautious, and I'd want to revisit it.
What about limiting? We have the same limit as the banner policy, that you only get 4 shots at this? Go ahead. 2? 2, I'm sorry.
I would suggest if we're going to give anything, most of these are, for the most part, when we were trying to figure out how do we we're trying to cast a wide net to make sure we're not missing anything as part of drafting this policy, which now as I look at it, we're missing Frederick Law Olmsted Society. So, at least I didn't see it. And so making sure that we're capturing enough so that the messages, because I go back to Economic Development Commission, Hop Stop, that's huge. they bring in a huge draw into Riverside. And there was different coordination between EDC and the last Hop Stop and promoting it and things of that sort.
Also with Big Head Fred, yeah.
Yes, exactly. It was amazing. And so we don't want to necessarily lose that. Big Head Fred went and visited the different businesses, and we have pictures, and we posted some pictures. And so, but that would fall under kind of advertise. And so that was our concern, is we want to make sure that we're following what the board and the public envisions. So also, what we're posting necessarily on social media, we're not necessarily doing e-flashes for. E-flashes are pretty much reserved for either something that is time sensitive, that has a larger draw, or is something that we're not necessarily putting on trending our social media. And so we kind of temper it as we're reviewing it, and staff and I are talking of, should we be sending this out as an e-flash? All of our meetings are e-flash. That goes without saying. If it's a power outage or something that we need people to know about, if it's a police or Public Works advisory, that's going out via e-flash. Some of these other items, like the just general interest items, are just being posted on and shared on social media.
Mr. Pollock?
None of this would apply to E-Flash,
So,
or it would? Because if we could say these expansions are not E-Flash, that would help, I think.
so we can certainly modify this and bring it back to the board to put more rails on it, to say that here's what we're going to send e-flashes on, make it have some sort of catch-all caveat for those that come up that maybe don't nicely fit. But all the other pieces, absolutely, where it's just more of, here's this great event that's going on in Riverside. Because one of the things that I'd hate to lose, and as staff and I reflected after the last board meeting, was it's really handy, I think, for most residents and newer residents to have that consolidated sheet of all the community events that are happening. We've included Hop Stop, we include RA, we include different events that are maybe sponsored by other groups, but it's nice to have that one sheeter where I like to believe residents put it on their fridge, and so that they know kind of what's coming up in Riverside, and know when there's different opportunities to volunteer, because we have such amazing groups here. And while we're staffed pretty thin, we'd like to be able to help facilitate those different things, because we're very fortunate to have all the volunteers that we do in the community.
Okay, I mean, I'll
So if I may.
go ahead.
Okay, what I'm hearing is we're gonna move some items around, and staff will update this. We'll include floss on it as well, to make sure that they are mentioned, and then we'll put more rails as it relates to what is even gonna qualify for an e-flash and what are just going to be more narrowly focused as social media.
Okay,
I agree with that, and I would say that I'd like to see the E-Flash reserved strictly for direct village business, so that if someone just wants to know when meetings are, or when the power's out, or whatever, they can trust that when they get an E-Flash, it's important.
I like that idea.
I would agree, 100%, yes.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
I would, okay. Mr. Mars?
Yeah, just for the benefit of staff, for the not-for-profits, I think you need to carry over some of the language from the banner policy about the organizations being based in Riverside and the events taking place or having a tie to Riverside.
How about the fact that the events have to be open to the general public? I mean, if you,
As opposed to like a wedding or?
well, no, opposed to, something that's not open to the general public. I don't know.
Okay.
Just, I mean, it's got to be for the common good of the residents.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yep. Yeah, so build that aspect in as well. I was also thinking like Friends of the Fourth and the Westera might fit in category 1 as well,
Yeah.
where the village is a co-sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. All right, you have enough to go on?
I do. I think we'll be one of the first communities in this area that has a communications policy specifically like this, because we've called around and everyone had something very broad, but nothing pointed and directed. So they asked us to provide ours once we're done. So thank you.
Great. Send them a quarter of our legal fees for it, too.
Actually, it was Ethan and I that drafted this.
Just, sorry. I have to throw those out every once in a while. All right, I'm lost where we are. I believe we're on G. Resolution approving and authorizing acceptance of a 2-year contract extension to the Village of Riverside and Christopher B. Burke Engineering Limited to perform professional engineering services. Director Tab.
So this resolution is basically a contract extension. In 2020, the village went out for RFQs for engineering services, ultimately settled on Christopher Burke Engineering. They've been with the village for a number of years now. The original contract proposal was for 2 years, so it did expire this year. And this resolution is for a 2-year extension to that agreement. After that, it would be eligible for a 1-year re-up for thereafter. So nothing has changed in the services, it's just the extension.
Okay. The only question I have is the budgeted amount is 137, the actual cost is 185.
That is a different item.
That's the next item.
Okay, but I think it's on this page, so if you wouldn't mind just explaining.
You want me to just go right into the
Yes.
item H?
Why
Or
don't we
do
go
wanna
right
approve-
into item H, since it falls into there?
Want to approve G first?
Oh, okay, we have to make them, okay. Just so everyone knows, the actual cost and the budgeted amount are different, and it has to relate to item H. So if I can have a motion and a second to approve item G.
Motion to approve item G.
Motion to approve by trustee Gallego, second.
I'll second.
Trustee Clarity, second. Any further questions? Yes.
I am confused about why we're doing a contract extension instead of going out for bids. Is that for a new engineer, or why is it a contract extension?
When we went for
Instead of a
an
renegotiation, yeah.
versus renegotiation,
Yeah.
An RFP.
I can handle that, or I'll start it. So for any type of professional service, you have to do a request for qualifications. And so we did that not that long ago for Burke. And so as part of that process, they had included extending our agreement. And so we did go through that. So a request for qualification is distinctly different than a request for proposal. A request for qualifications is you're evaluating the credentials of the firm. You're not talking pricing. You narrow it down to your top 3. And then if you can't come to an agreement on pricing with number 1, then you go to the secondary one. And so also, so my recommendation would be that we stay with Burke as well, because we just did a process not that long ago, and I don't have the date.
21 is when it was signed or approved by the board,
Yes, but we actually did a request for,
fall of 2020.
thank you. And so typically, you don't want to be doing a request for qualifications with that much frequency and have turnover of these key contractual firms, because then continuity of knowledge and things of that sort, it becomes a little bit more challenging.
So you wouldn't want to give a 4-year contract so that you don't have to extend it every 2 years?
We could certainly ask. I
Well, I
believe
mean, I'm just
our.
trying to figure out why. I'm learning.
No, I appreciate that. I think our initial request for qualifications called for a 2-year extension, so I think that was more on us and how we crafted it initially. I will also note that Burke knows how to go through the cultural clearance process that Riverside requires. Most firms are not knowledgeable on that, and so basically when we do a major project, they have to assess properties to make sure that there's no impact based on our state historic, based on our landmark designation. There.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. Any further questions? We have a motion and a second to approve. Ms. Francis, if you please call the roll.
Certainly. Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Do we have, who was the motion? Sorry.
Motion was by trustee Gallegos, second by trustee Clarity.
Thank you. Sorry. Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We move on to letter H, a resolution approving and authorizing acceptance of a proposal from Christopher B. Burke Engineering to perform part-time in-house engineering service for the Village of Riverside. Mr. Tab.
Yes. So the budget amount pertains to this particular item. Last year, it's been brought up at a couple board meetings that there's been a desire to streamline the permitting process. And as part of that, we often send stuff out to be reviewed by engineering, whether it's grading, any other community development item. There's also been the interest by staff to have somebody available to review utility permits, interact with the utilities themselves, do site visits, any other proposals. There is the Groveland levy, which is also on our radar, which will require quite a bit of reviewing. So the effort to streamline all of these processes was originally proposed in the staffing plan to hire an in-house village engineer. Since then, we have had discussion, and we were actually approached by Burke, which they offered a part-time engineer, should we be interested in that for these part-time engineering items. The particular engineer that they would be offering on a part-time basis is actually the engineer who oversaw the Selborne reconstruction. In addition to that project, he oversaw the York Road construction and Burling resurfacing, the East Burlington streetscape, the Metro Station pedestrian access improvements, and then most recently the Selborne one. So there, some numbers were ran by the finance department, and if you look at the chart on the second page, it was broken down in the annual hours and the costs were associated, where they did in aggregate come out to $185,000. Originally budgeted for the full-time engineer was the $137 and change. These hourly estimates for each one of these line items are estimates in a sense because we have never had a part-time in-house engineer. So I should mention that the proposal, which I'll talk about, it's a one-year term. So because it's on a part-time basis, the village would like to have the option if it doesn't work out. We're not committed, and of course vice versa, the engineering firm would kind of be in the same position. The cost savings that we would want to talk about when we're talking about the expense is when we hire Christopher Burke Engineering to do a design build. While the project does go out to bid, they have contractual experience with a lot of these bidding partners, and ultimately there are cost savings of 5 to 10% by doing the design build versus the design and then bid out to any available bidders. So of that 5 to 10%, which you can see itemized in this chart here, on the higher end, it would basically cover the annual anticipated expense of the engineer themselves. In addition to that, by having the engineer on site already for our capital improvement projects, which are estimated at 5 months per year in 2023, because we have the Shenstone project coming up, as well as some green alleys that are part of the capital project. So by having the engineer on site for those already, we would have the flexibility, should we have something in-house, where we can call them off the street, and they are able to look at that right away, possibly while the resident is still here with the questions. And of course, being in town, it would be very easy to schedule a consultation with the engineer for any kind of issues that the resident might have during an application and or review process. So that complete effort is, in a sense, we're trying to streamline all of our processes, not only from the community development side, the public works side, some of the Groveland levy stuff, We see it as a benefit not only to staff but to the residents as a whole. Did I miss anything on the financial side?
If I may, there's just
Yes.
one particular piece. If we didn't go with Burke for in-house in this particular capacity, we would not have the ability, and we found this out as we went on the path of, as Burke approached us about this potential option/opportunity. They told us that if they are not the engineer of record, meaning if they're not, whether it's through regular means or part-time, then we could not do the design build process because they have to be the engineer of record in order to facilitate that. And so we would not be able to experience those cost savings. They did, and Director Tabb did a great job of talking with Burke about what the pricing was. They are charging us a reduced rate for these particular hours based on the credentials of the engineer that they're assigning to Riverside. And also if that individual is unavailable and our other engineer, Orion Gailey, needs to step in, he would be charging us at that reduced rate for regular office hours. And they have said to us that they are probably going to be losing money on this. And so they're not sure if they want to do it more than 1 year, but they're willing to do basically this pilot program with Riverside since we've been with Burke for so many years.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dan, for all the work. We need a motion and a second to accept this.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by trustee Gallegos, second. Second by trustee Marshazga. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Manager Francis?
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Motion carries. Move on to letter J, which is Building Department Inspections Overview. Ms. Monroe. Yes, Mr. Pollock.
Unless there's some real need, I would like to suggest we table J and K to the next meeting, and we can be better prepared to discuss it. It's been a long meeting. We've had a lot of discussions. I'd like to give these items the attention they deserve, fresh at a meeting.
Unless there's a pressing issue for us to vote.
I don't have a problem with that. Anybody else curious? Is there any issue why we're pressing? Go ahead. Other than,
No, you look disappointed you won't give your presentation.
All I was going to mention was that I prepared a memo for your consideration, and I would answer any questions if you like. So if you want to talk further at a future meeting,
okay, we'll
No concerns at all.
We'll put J off. I would like to, at least on K, to get an understanding of the lead service lines, because we've tried to put some of this together. It's only informal, trying to give you all some direction. So if you can just give us the high level, so people can start understanding what we're up against.
Okay. I'll keep it very high level. So approximately a year ago, the state passed a lead service line replacement notification act that went into effect Jan 1 of 2022. So there's two components to that. The village is required to develop a comprehensive water service line inventory, which is currently underway. We have till April 15th, 2024 to complete that. The other main component is the creation of a lead service line replacement plan, which we have already completed, and that was submitted as part of our IEP application for grant funding. At the conclusion of the board meeting on February 17th of last year, after our discussion, the consensus of the board was to cover 100% of the cost to repair lead service lines should an emergency repair be needed. Okay. So knowing that, to date, the village has covered the cost of 4 service lines, 3 of which occurred during 2022 at an approximate cost of $10,000 each. There are another 2 service lines in the process of being permitted for replacement at similar costs. Having said that, as part of the village oversight, we are required to get 3 quotes for each replacement, which prolongs the process, as you can imagine, but we're currently engaging other municipalities to see if they would be interested in a joint bidding effort to help streamline the process and/or possibly bring down some of those costs. So we've reached out to other municipalities. Regarding the funding in its entirety, the village was optimistic last year that we would be receiving grant funding through the state. It was a mandate that the state did put out, and grants were anticipated. All of the information we received was that we would be getting something. Recently, the village was advised by its engineering firm that new criteria will be used starting in 2024 to assess the loan applications, and that the village would likely not be eligible should these criteria, which I can list off really quick, be filed as part of the loan application. And some of those criteria: median household income. The one we would probably qualify for it is the age of our homes. The 1990 is the kind of the cutoff, and as we know, most of our homes are older than that, so we would score fairly well on that. Children under the age of 6, unemployment rate, poverty rate, social security rate, supplemental income rate, minority rate, and limited English-speaking households. So each one of those bullet points, you're scored accordingly, and then the amount of funds and/or forgivable loans, 0 interest, it's all derived off of that. So having said that, staff is seeking board direction on the following, which is, since grant funding was not secured and does not appear that we will be able to secure it in the future, does the board want the village to continue to pay for 100% of lead service line replacements? So how much, do you want to get into the kind of some of the flow chart, or do we want to keep it at that for now?
Well, it's just some of the things that we shared. Right now, the village has ordained that we will on when we do Shenstone, we go to the B-box.
Exactly. So we have a water main project coming up this late summer on Shenstone Road between Delaplane and Harlem. And as part of that construction project, one of the components is we are updating the water main from its current 4-inch. Included in the CIP under construction estimates would be from the main to the B-box, which is currently the village's responsibility. What's not included in those CIP expenses would be from the B-box to the meter, which is currently the homeowner's responsibility. Under the current directive by the board last year, we would then be covering the total expense, because we have not received grant funding, but based on the discussion last year, it was the village would be covering those expenses in the interim until we receive grant funding, which at this point now, we don't foresee that happening in the near future. So that being said, on Shenstone, there are estimated 51 lead services that would have to be replaced with copper at an estimated cost of an additional $450,000. That's above and beyond what was budgeted in the CIP for that project. And that $450,000 is for the B-box to the meter, the residential portion of that. So if we want, in your packet, there is a flow chart talking about how we foresee some of these expenses and different ways of funding this if the village were to elect not to cover 100% of that. And I can go through that if you would like.
Well, just again, high level. It's
Trying
either
to keep it high level. Yep.
it's either we pay for it and we fund it through the enterprise fund, which would mean we'd have to increase fees, or we stop at the B-box and the resident has to take over from the B-box to their home, which is about $10,000, or they have the option to sign an IDPH waiver that says they don't want it.
Right, yes. So the current ordinance, the resident is responsible from the B-box to the meter. We can keep it that way, and because we're not receiving funding from the state, the village can elect to charge the homeowner that portion of the water service. There's different ways of doing that, lump sum payment plan, SSAs.
Yeah.
So we can charge them in one fashion or another. If the village or the board wants to change the ordinance in its entirety, the resident can be responsible from the main to the meter, which some other towns, that's how they have it crafted. And then they would in turn be responsible for the entire service, which again, if you don't receive state funding, the village can charge the resident for the entire cost of that if it were to be constructed that way by ordinance.
Or the resident can say, I don't want it done, and can sign the.
Or if the village does not want to pay for resident's current portion or any of it by ordinance, and they approach the resident saying, we're doing this as part of a water main project, they can sign a waiver that goes on file with the IDPH stating that, in essence, they're not allowing the village into their property to do this repair and, basically new service.
Okay. So what I think what we would like to get for the next meeting is, it's a great overview. If the village was going to pay from the B box to the home, how would we fund that and at what cost? So we would fund it through some sort of bond issue or water rate charge. What is that charge? And what is that going to cost per, and you don't have to do it now because I know you're on the back of a napkin stuff because we started this like last week. So get another couple weeks to get it done right. What that charge is, and I think everyone here needs to try to figure out, what's equitable, is it unreasonable for us to have the resident pay for that mark, or is it totally reasonable because it's their property? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that we need to make this decision to stop the emergency bleeding, because we need to figure that out, and we need to be able to get this wrapped up before Shenstone comes up.
There should be direction prior to Shenstone.
Yes. So we need an answer on this in the next month. Yes, Mr.
Could I add one more issue
Sure.
to the list, and why I think it's important that this is at the board level? The concern I have on this is that too many people, if we decide not to pay for it, and too many people opt out and say, I'm not going to spend the $10,000, has that devalued our housing stock? Because now we have a high number of houses that don't have their lead removed. That means when the new owner comes in and buys it, they're going to have to spend that in 2023 dollars, whatever that may mean, to make it lead-free. So, I think it becomes, are we going down the route of bonds to, maintain and increase the value of our houses in the village is how I look at it. So just want to throw that out as something more to put in the mix between now and next time we discuss it.
And I actually went back and forth, and back and forth, and when it comes to these emergency repairs, we are all susceptible to that, because we all live in houses, or most of us live in houses that are considerably old. My house is 100 years old, so my pipe is 100 years old. I don't know when Delaplane will ever be touched with a main, so I may never, in the next 17 years, whether I'm here or not, I may never see the value if I should pay, more to my water meter, or more to my water bill every month. But I look at it, and I look at that dollar, and my meter, or my line, again, it's 100 years old. It could be spewing water right now. Because it's old. So I look at it as, if I had it, it's a $10,000 expense that I know I'm going to have at my house sometime. If I had a $10,000 car, would I spend $150 a year to ensure that if that car was damaged, it would be repaired or replaced? And the answer is yes. That's an easy decision. So in my mind, paying $150 more a year, if that's the kind of numbers we're talking about, allows us to replace all of the lead lines that need to be replaced. That goes with not only our replacement policy, but our emergency policy. That's an insurance policy I'll grab all day long. But that's my thought as of today, and it could change when we get the numbers. So I just want everyone to kind of think of that thought, because I just thought about it, and I'd be really interesting to hear what people say when they hear that, because we all know what people cringe when we say we're going to increase their water rate. People will have a lot of time over the next couple weeks to give us feedback. But I appreciate your high-level discussion, and if Karen, if you can get us dig down a little bit farther for the next meeting, that would be great. One other thing, and I don't want to take us too long because Mr. Pollock's getting tired over there. If you could just give us an update on the meters and how it's going. You shared with me a couple stories, and I think it's really, really important that people know that, you pay $300 and something for this meter, the actual benefit of this meter.
Sure. We basically began installing meters last August. We slowly ramped it up, started installing in earnest in November. We're approximately 125 meters a month now that are getting installed. As of this afternoon, we had 595 installed throughout town. And with the new meters, we have the capability of knowing a lot of information. We get notifications, whether it's, three of the primary ones are a leak, a burst, or a low temp. Those are really what we kind of hone in on, but we get dry pipe, we get reverse, and there's a whole slew of information I can get. But of the three, the leak, the burst, and the low temp, which are, of course, pertinent to this time of year, we contact, so I get a report every morning. And when something new comes up, I contact the resident or a property owner, and then we log that, so we have an idea who we've contacted and how often and so forth. So just some real quick numbers. Since we started, we have contacted 17 people that had potential leaks. Of course, I don't follow up with them as to what their plumber did, but they came across as a leak. We notified them. Most of them were surprised, as you might imagine. And then, of course, we go through the litany of what we can test in our homes. Your toilets, any other fixtures in your house that might be dripping. And most never call me back, so I assume they're fixed. The other, one of the key indicators is the low temp alarm, and basically what that is the meter not only records water temperature, but it records ambient air temperature. So for those that have what's called an unfinished basement, where your meter might be adjacent to a window that isn't the newest window on the market, and so you're getting drafts off of that window, and we're currently in a cold snap now. There was one more so at the beginning of the year, around Christmas even, and we were notified and contacted 22 people on the low temp alarm, which alerts below 40 degrees. So we're right in, getting close to where there might be some issues. And then the real key metric is the burst indicator, and we have received 5 of those. And what that means is there is a sustained amount of water flowing for a period of time. So it sends me a burst alert. And of those 5, 2 of them were averaging 550 gallons per hour of water being released into either a home. One was under a foundation, or they had radiant heat. It happened to be on the floor of the building. So that's a lot of water, right? We try to get them as soon as possible, but sometimes I get the email 11 at night or midnight, whatever it is, and then as soon as I get it, we of course make contact with them. Most of these 5 that contacted or were alerted was over Christmas, and nobody was home. So of course we made the effort to contact these people, which were out of town. We were able to, through various methods, get into their home, isolate it, and shut the water off either inside the home or at the street, and coincidentally, they said I wasn't gonna be home for a few days, you know, and had we not known, they would have come home to a bathtub in their house. So while there is a cost associated with these meters, at 550 gallons an hour, it doesn't take very long to pay for that. And some of these people have already, you know, paid for
Reap
their
the
meter, they reap the benefit in essence. And as we install more, you know, we're only 600 in, we're 20% of the way there. So as we continue this, we're gonna get some more of these notifications, and you know, it's only all good. So.
Yeah, I think it's great. I actually, we had a resident that you told me about had a burst on the outside of his house through
On a hose, right.
Through a hose, and was blowing, what,
550 an hour, yeah.
He had no idea. He went
Right.
over and turned off his water, and I called him 3 days later, because I had his phone number, and I said, did you know this was going on? And he still had no idea.
I don't want to wake him up at 6 in the morning, so.
But
I waited.
he had no idea. And he was extremely grateful that, you know, that would have been, you know, that was flooding the street by the time you got there.
It was, yeah, there was so much water, it was sheet draining across his front yard, across his neighbor's yard into the street, and it was freezing up so quickly it wasn't making it to the street drain, so half of the road was basically an ice rink.
Thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate it, Mr. Tapp. And we're looking forward to our next meeting to have lead service lines. Last thing on the list is the trustee report, the cross-climate communication. Trustee Marzazga?
I am happy to report on this. As you can see in your packet, and I am just going to summarize very quickly, we had a wonderful community engagement event on January 19th called The Road to 2050. We were delighted that over 75 members of the Riverside community showed up from many different community groups. We had students from RB and Hauser attend, and it was really just a wonderful opportunity to introduce the C4 and each of our point people for the different areas to residents, and really give them a chance to understand what was going on and why we were doing it and what we were asking them. So I was really very happy to work with Ashley, and she facilitated a rapid fire kind of activity for the community to kind of brainstorm and get ideas down as far as each one of these different priority areas and what residents would like to see here in Riverside in 2050. And then later, the second stage of it was to prioritize that. So there were hundreds of ideas generated. And you have a summary of that in your packet here. So you can just kind of see what, you know, thought processes were at these different tables, and what people sort of gravitated towards. Concurrently, however, we are also running an online survey on the C4 page of the village website, which is open for people who did not attend the event to kind of weigh in on these 6 different priority areas, which include place, prosperity, health and well-being, connectivity, living infrastructure, and also resource regeneration, which covers basically all of your climate and air and water factors and waste streams as well. So that provides a different forum, and we're getting different types of responses from that, since it's so individualized and people don't have that group think going on. It is not rapid fire. You can take as much time with the survey as you want. We're getting very different information from that survey. There are some commonalities, some trends that are the same, but our C4 team met the Thursday following our Road to 2050 event with the preliminary event data, but we have not seen any of this survey data yet. So at our next meeting, which is at the end of February, we will sit down with both sets of data and really take a look at the categories and matrices that are provided in the C4 guidebook that was given to all the different communities. And we will look at it first through the lens of the imperatives of climate protection, resilience, and
Everything.
equity. Oh, and so we'll see where that falls. Then we'll sort of take a look at whether we are looking at short-term, long-term, mid-range projects. We'll also layer in community acceptance of some of these things, and then we'll look at funding. Is this something that we, can accomplish at little to no cost? Is it something that must be grant funded and grants are available? Or is it something that we have no idea, how it will be funded? And so in looking at all of those things, then we'll kind of put together recommendations and bring those back.
How long will the survey be up online?
The survey will be up for another week.
Okay. And somebody was there and sent me pictures. And I noticed that Riverside TV was there. When is it on our website yet, or should ask Riverside TV? Colin?
I don't think it's online.
You're still there.
I'm still here. I don't think it's online yet.
I saw some initial draft video. They had put together kind of an assembly of the footage that was taken. Some really great stuff. They are working on putting together a very short introductions with each of those leads for the 6 areas, tenants for C4. And then they will also be putting together a short piece on the introductions given at the event and some of that action, so people get a sense of what transpired and how they can participate. So we're hoping to see that, the introductions at minimum in maybe a week or so, and then shortly after, we'll post that on RTV, the big summary event.
I did get some comments, and they were all very positive about both our trustees that are spearheading this, as well as Ashley and Darnell. Everyone, they thought it was very good. So thank you very much for all the work you guys are doing. Some people might ask, how much is this costing us? This doesn't cost us anything other than Aberdeen's time, Kristen's time, and Ashley's time, which is all valuable. But I believe Katrina Thompson, who's the mayor of Broadview, went to Washington a couple weeks ago and received $100,000 grant to keep this thing funded. So this is all grant funded. So thank you all for what you're doing. I appreciate it. Any questions for Aberdeen or Kristen or Ashley? Okay. Any other reports? Okay. Hearing none. I'd like someone to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by trustee Gallegos, second.
Second.
Second by trustee Marshaga. Any discussion? Hearing none, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshaga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Polly.
Aye. Motion carries.